Michael Richardson looked at himself in the large mirror one last time. His black suit was perfect. His hair was combed back just right. His shoes were shiny and new. Today was his wedding day, and everything had to be perfect. He smiled at his reflection. 5 years ago, his life was very different. He was poor then, he had no money. He lived in a small apartment. He drove an old car that barely worked. But now, everything had changed. He was rich. He was successful. He was respected. Michael walked out of the dressing room and into the main hall of St. Catherine's Cathedral. The church was huge and beautiful. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling like diamonds. White flowers filled every corner. The smell of roses and lilacs everywhere. 300 people sat in the wooden chairs, all dressed in their best clothes. These were important people, rich people, famous people. People who mattered in the city. He looked around at all the faces. Some were his business partners. Others were his new friends from the country club. Many were Victoria's family and friends. Victoria was his bride-to-be. She was young and beautiful. She had long blonde hair and bright blue eyes. She came from a wealthy family. Her father owned several hotels. Her mother was always in the society pages of newspapers. Michael had met Victoria at a charity event 2 years ago. She was 28 years old. He was 48. At first, he thought she would not be interested in him. But she was drawn to his success. She loved hearing about his business deals. She was impressed by his big house and expensive cars. She enjoyed the fancy restaurants he took her to, and the expensive gifts he bought her. The church musicians began to play soft music. Michael walked to the front of the church and stood next to the minister. The minister was an old man with white hair and kind eyes. He smiled at Michael and nodded. Everything was ready. Michael's best man, David, stood beside him. David was his business partner and one of his few real friends. David had helped him build his company from nothing. They had worked 18-hour days together. They had borrowed money when banks said no. They had taken big risks that could have left them with nothing. "You ready for this?" David whispered to Michael. "More than ready," Michael whispered back. "This is the start of my new life." Michael thought about how far he had come. 5 years ago he was divorced and broken. He had lost everything in the divorce. His wife had taken half of what little they had. But he had used that pain to push himself harder. He had started his technology company with just $5,000 and a big dream. The first year was terrible. He worked day and night. He ate cheap food and slept on a couch in his tiny office. He made phone calls to hundreds of people, trying to find customers. Most people said no. Many people hung up on him. But he never gave up. Slowly, things got better. He got his first big customer, then another, then another. His small company began to grow. He hired more people. He moved to a bigger office. He started making real money. By the third year, his company was worth millions. By the fourth year, he was on the cover of business magazines. Now, in his fifth year, he was worth over $50 million. He had made it. He had won. The music changed, and everyone in the church stood up. Michael turned around and saw Victoria at the back of the church. She looked like a princess in her white wedding dress. The dress cost more than most people's cars. Her diamond necklace sparkled in the light. Her father walked beside her, proud and smiling. As Victoria walked down the long aisle toward him, Michael felt proud. Everyone was looking at them. Everyone could see what he had achieved. This beautiful young woman was choosing him. This perfect wedding was his. This new life was his reward for all his hard work. He thought about his old life and felt happy it was behind him. That life was full of sadness and pain. That life had a small apartment and bills they could not pay. That life had a wife who cried too much and never smiled anymore. That life had doctor visits and bad news and broken dreams. But this life was different. This life had success and money and respect. This life had a beautiful wife who admired him. This life had a big house with a swimming pool and a 3-car garage. This life had expensive vacations and fancy parties and important friends. Victoria reached the front of the church and took her place beside Michael. She looked up at him with love in her eyes. At least, he thought it was love. Maybe it was admiration for what he had built. Maybe it was excitement about the life he could give her. It did not matter to him. What mattered was that she was here, choosing him, making him look good in front of all these important people. The minister opened his book and began to speak. His voice was calm and strong. "We are gathered here today to join Michael and Victoria in marriage," he said. "Marriage is a sacred promise between two people who love each other." Michael listened to the words, but his mind wandered. He looked out at all the faces watching them. He saw business leaders who now respected him. He saw wealthy families who had accepted him into their circle. He saw young men who wanted to be like him and older men who wished they had his success. In the back of the church, he noticed some faces he did not recognize. Probably Victoria's distant relatives or family friends. It did not matter. What mattered was that his new life was starting today. His past was buried and forgotten. No one here knew about his old life. No one here knew about his struggles. No one here knew about the pain he had left behind. The minister continued talking about love and commitment and staying together through good times and bad times. Michael had heard these words before at his first wedding 20 years ago, but that was different. That was when he was young and poor and full of dreams that never came true. This was when he was successful and rich and ready to enjoy the life he had earned. Victoria squeezed his hand and smiled at him. Her smile was bright and perfect, just like everything else about this day, just like everything else about his new life. He squeezed her hand back and smiled at her. This was his moment. This was his victory. This was his proof that he had won. The minister looked out at the crowd of well-dressed people. His voice was clear and strong as he spoke the traditional words. "If anyone has a reason why these two should not be married, speak now or forever hold your peace." It was just a formality. No one ever spoke up during this part. Michael felt relaxed and confident. In a few more minutes he would be married to Victoria. His new life would officially begin. His past would be completely behind him, but then something happened that changed everything. The heavy wooden doors at the back of the church opened with a loud bang. The sound echoed through the quiet cathedral. Everyone turned around to see what was happening. A woman stood in the doorway. She was alone. She was not dressed for a wedding. Michael's heart stopped. He knew that woman. He had not seen her in 5 years, but he would recognize her anywhere. It was Sarah, his ex-wife. Sarah looked different than he remembered. She was thinner now. Her brown hair was shorter and had some gray in it. She wore a simple blue dress that looked old. Her shoes were worn. She carried a small black purse in her hands, but her eyes were the same. They were still the deep brown eyes he had once loved. She walked slowly down the aisle. Her footsteps echoed in the silent church. 300 people watched her with shock and confusion. Some whispered to each other. Others just stared. No one knew what to do. Michael felt sick. His perfect day was being ruined. How dare she come here? How dare she try to destroy his happiness? He had worked so hard to leave the past behind. He had built a new life. He deserved to be happy. Victoria grabbed his arm tightly. Her fingernails dug into his skin through his suit jacket. "Who is that?" she whispered. Her voice was scared and angry. Michael could not answer. His mouth was dry. His hands were shaking. He watched Sarah walk closer and closer to the front of the church. She moved slowly but with determination. She had something important to say. He could see it in her face. David, his best man, stepped forward. "Should I call security?" he whispered. To Michael, before Michael could answer, Sarah reached the front of the church. She stopped just a few feet away from the altar. She looked directly at Michael. Her eyes were sad but strong. She had been crying, but she was not crying now. "Hello, Michael," she said quietly. Her voice carried clearly through the silent church. The minister looked confused. This had never happened in all his years of performing weddings. "Ma'am," he said gently, "this is a private ceremony. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Sarah shook her head. "I can't leave. Not yet. There's something everyone needs to know, something important." Victoria stepped closer to Michael. "Who is this woman?" she demanded loudly. "Michael, who is she?" Michael finally found his voice. "She's no one," he said. "She's just someone from my past. Security will escort her out." But Sarah spoke before security could reach her. "I'm his ex-wife," she said clearly. "I was married to him for 15 years. I know him better than anyone in this room." Gasps and whispers filled the church. Victoria's face went white. She looked at Michael with shock and hurt. "Ex-wife? You told me you were only married once before, and it was just for 2 years. You said it meant nothing." Michael felt trapped. "It's complicated," he said weakly. "We can talk about this later." "No," Sarah said firmly. "We can't wait. Victoria, before you marry this man, you need to know who he really is. You need to know what he's capable of." 2 security guards finally reached Sarah. They were big men in dark suits. "Ma'am, you need to come with us," one of them said. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out an old envelope. It was yellow with age and worn from being handled many times. "Before you take me away, let me show you this," she said. "Let me tell you about the children." The word children hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. His legs felt weak. This was his worst nightmare. This was the one thing he never wanted anyone to know about. "What children?" Victoria asked. Her voice was high and scared. Sarah held up the envelope. "Michael and I had children together, twins, a boy and a girl. Emma and James, they would be 5 years old now if they had lived." The church was completely silent now. Even the security guards stopped moving. Everyone was listening to every word. Victoria turned to look at Michael. "You have children? You told me you never had children. You said you didn't want children until you met me." Michael's face was red. "I don't have children," he said quickly. "She's lying. She's trying to ruin our wedding because she's jealous of my success." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed strong. "I'm not lying. And they're not alive anymore. They died when they were just babies. But Michael has never dealt with losing them. He's never grieved for them. He's never even talked about them." She opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a piece of paper that looked old and wrinkled. "This is a letter Michael wrote to our unborn babies," she said. "I found it after our divorce. He wrote it when I was 7 months pregnant, before everything went wrong." Victoria looked confused and scared. "I don't understand. What happened to the babies?" Sarah looked directly at her. "There were complications during my pregnancy. The doctors said my life was in danger. They said we had to choose between saving me or trying to save both babies. Michael made the decision to save me. The babies were born too early. They lived for just 3 hours." Tears started running down Sarah's face, but she kept talking. "Those 3 hours were the only time Michael ever held his children. After they died, he never wanted to talk about them again. He said talking about them made him too sad to work. He said I needed to get over it so we could move on with our lives." The people in the church were listening to every word. The women were crying. The men looked uncomfortable. Victoria was staring at Michael like she had never seen him before. "That's enough," Michael said loudly. "Security, get her out of here now." But Sarah was not finished. "Victoria, you need to know what kind of man you're marrying. When I was grieving for our babies, he was working 18-hour days. When I cried, he got angry. When I wanted to talk about Emma and James, he said I was holding him back. He said I was the reason his business was failing." She looked around at all the people watching. 6 months after our babies died, Michael started having an affair with his business partner. When I found out, he said it was my fault for being too sad all the time. He said I wasn't the woman he married anymore. Victoria's hands were shaking. "Is this true?" she asked Michael. Michael felt like the whole world was falling apart around him. All these people were looking at him. All these important people who respected him. All these wealthy people who had accepted him. Now they were hearing about the worst time in his life. Now they were learning his secrets. "She's bitter," he said desperately. "She's angry because I became successful after our divorce. She wants to destroy my happiness." Sarah shook her head sadly. "I don't want to destroy your happiness, Michael. I want to save Victoria from making the same mistake I made. I want her to know that when life gets hard, you run away. When people need you most, you abandon them. Sarah took a deep breath and looked around the church. 300 people were watching her every move. She had never spoken to so many people before. She was scared, but she knew she had to continue. Victoria deserved to know the truth. Let me tell you the whole story, Sarah said. Her voice was quiet but clear. Michael and I tried to have children for 8 years. We went to many doctors. We spent all our money on treatments. We hoped and prayed every month. We were so happy when I finally got pregnant. She paused and wiped tears from her eyes. When the doctor told us we were having twins, Michael cried with joy. He bought baby clothes that same day. He painted the nursery himself. He read baby books every night. He talked to my belly and sang to the babies. Victoria looked at Michael with confusion. This was a side of him she had never seen. The Michael she knew was always busy with work. He never talked about having children. He always said he was too focused on his career. During the pregnancy, Michael was the perfect husband, Sarah continued. He came to every doctor appointment. He held my hand during the ultrasounds. He was so excited to be a father. He already had names picked out, Emma Rose and James Michael. Some of the women in the church were crying now. Even some of the men looked emotional. This was not what they had expected when they came to a wedding. Everything was perfect until the 7th month, Sarah said. I went to my regular checkup. The doctor looked worried. He did more tests. Then he called in other doctors. They all looked at the results and talked in whispers. Sarah's voice started to shake. The doctor told us that something was wrong with my placenta. The babies were not getting enough oxygen. My blood pressure was dangerously high. If we waited much longer, all 3 of us might die. Michael stood frozen at the altar. He did not want to hear this story again. He had spent 5 years trying to forget it. He had built his whole new life on forgetting it. The doctor said we had 2 choices, Sarah continued. We could try to wait and hope the babies would survive to full term, but that might kill me and the babies. Or we could deliver the babies right away and try to save them in the hospital, but they would be very premature and might not survive. Victoria was listening with her mouth open. She had never heard anything so sad and scary. Michael and I talked. For hours, Sarah said, we cried together. We prayed together. Finally, Michael said he could not live without me. He said the babies needed their mother. He made the decision to deliver them early and hope for the best. The church was completely silent. Even the security guards were listening instead of trying to remove Sarah. The doctors did an emergency cesarean section, Sarah said. Emma was born first. She weighed 2 pounds and 3 ounces. James was born 2 minutes later. He weighed 1 pound and 15 ounces. They were so tiny and fragile. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo. It was old and worn from being handled so much. This is the only picture I have of all 4 of us together, she said, holding it up. Michael is holding Emma. I'm holding James. We were a family for 3 hours. Victoria could see the photo from where she stood. It showed a much younger Michael and Sarah in a hospital room. They both looked exhausted but happy. They were holding tiny babies wrapped in blankets. The babies fought so hard to live, Sarah said. They were connected to machines that helped them breathe. The doctors and nurses did everything they could. Michael and I took turns holding them. We sang to them. We told them how much we loved them. Tears were running down Sarah's face freely now. Emma lived for 3 hours and 12 minutes. James lived for 3 hours and 6 minutes. They died within minutes of each other. The doctors said their little bodies were just too small and weak. Many people in the church were crying now. This was the saddest story they had ever heard. Victoria was sobbing. After the babies died, Michael held me while I cried, Sarah said. He cried too. He said we would get through this together. He said our babies would always be in our hearts. He said we would never forget them. She looked directly at Michael. But you did forget them, didn't you, Michael? You decided they were too painful to remember. Michael wanted to run away. He wanted to disappear. All these people were looking at him with pity and judgment. His perfect wedding was completely ruined. For the first few weeks after the funeral, Michael was supportive, Sarah said. He held me when I cried. He let me talk about Emma and James. He looked at their pictures with me. But then he started to change. Sarah turned to address Victoria directly. He started working longer hours. He said staying busy helped him deal with the pain. When I wanted to talk about our babies, he said it was too depressing. When I cried, he got frustrated. He said I needed to move on. Victoria looked at Michael with new eyes. Is this true? She asked him. Michael did not know what to say. How could he explain that the pain was too much? How could he explain that? Thinking about his dead children made him feel like he was dying inside. 3 months after the funeral, Michael stopped coming to the cemetery with me, Sarah said. I went every week to put flowers on their graves. I would sit there and talk to them. I would tell them about my day and how much I missed them. Michael said it was unhealthy. He said I was obsessed with death. Sarah's voice got stronger. 6 months after we lost our babies, Michael's business started having problems. He was trying to start a software company, but it was failing. He was losing money. He was stressed all the time. And he blamed me. She looked around at all the people listening. He said I was bringing negative energy into his life. He said my sadness was making him depressed and affecting his work. He said I needed to get over it so he could focus on being successful. Victoria was staring at Michael in shock. You blamed her for your business failing? It wasn't that simple, Michael said weakly. We were both going through a hard time. Sarah shook her head. It was that simple, Michael. You decided that your grief was inconvenient. You decided that remembering our children was holding you back. So you made a choice to forget them and move on. She turned back to Victoria. That's when he started staying out late. He said he was working, but I knew better. I could smell perfume on his clothes. I found receipts for expensive dinners at restaurants we never went to together. The crowd was getting restless. Some people were whispering to each other. Others looked uncomfortable. This was more drama than they had expected at a society wedding. When I confronted him about the affair, he didn't even deny it, Sarah said. He said he needed to be with someone who made him happy. He said I was too broken to be a good wife. He said I reminded him of everything that went wrong in his life. Victoria's face was pale. An affair? While you were grieving your babies? Her name was Jennifer, Sarah said. She was his business partner. She was young and ambitious and never talked about sad things. She made him feel successful and important. She never mentioned our dead children. Sarah reached into the envelope again and pulled out a letter. This is what Michael wrote to Emma and James when I was 7 months pregnant, she said. Before everything went wrong. Before he decided they were too painful to remember. She unfolded the letter carefully. It was written in Michael's handwriting. Dear Emma and James, she read aloud. I can't wait to meet you both. I promise to be the best father in the world. I promise to love you and protect you forever. I promise to teach you everything I know and help you become amazing people. I promise to never let anything hurt you. I will always be there for you, no matter what happens, love, Daddy. The church was completely silent. Victoria was crying so hard she could barely stand. Even some of the men were wiping their eyes. Sarah folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. That's the man I married, she said. That's the father our children deserved. But when they needed him most, when I needed him most, he decided his promises didn't matter anymore. Sarah put the letter back in her purse, but she was not finished with her story. The people in the church were listening to every word. Victoria was still crying, but she was also listening carefully. She needed to know everything about the man she was about to marry. After I found out about the affair, our marriage fell apart completely, Sarah said. Michael moved out of our house. He said he needed space to think, but he never came back. He filed for divorce 3 weeks later. She looked around at all the wealthy people in their expensive clothes. Michael told everyone that we grew apart after losing the babies. He said we wanted different things. He made it sound like it was mutual and peaceful, but that's not what happened. Victoria wiped her eyes and looked at Michael. What really happened? She asked him. Michael felt like he was trapped in a nightmare. All these important people were hearing the worst story of his life. His reputation was being destroyed, his perfect wedding was ruined, his new life was falling apart. Tell her, Michael, Sarah said. Tell her how you handled the divorce. Tell her how you treated the woman who had been your wife for 15 years. When Michael did not answer, Sarah continued. He hired the best divorce lawyer in the city, someone I could never afford. The lawyer found ways to hide Michael's assets so I would get as little as possible in the settlement. She turned to Victoria. I was still grieving and depressed. I was taking medication for anxiety. I was seeing a therapist twice a week. I was not thinking clearly about legal and financial matters. Michael took advantage of that. David, Michael's best man, looked uncomfortable. He remembered those days. He had watched Michael become cold and calculating during the divorce. He had seen Michael hide money and assets to avoid giving Sarah her fair share. I trusted him, Sarah said. Even after everything he had done, I still trusted him. When he brought me papers to sign, I signed them without reading them carefully. I thought he would be fair. I thought he would take care of me like he had promised to do when we got married. She shook her head sadly. I was wrong. Michael made sure I got the minimum amount required by law. He kept our house. He kept his business. He kept most of our savings. He left me with almost nothing. Victoria looked shocked. You left her with nothing? After losing your children? I gave her what the law required, Michael said defensively. She got half of our documented assets. Sarah laughed bitterly. Half of the documented assets? That's the key phrase. Michael had hidden most of his money in business accounts I didn't know about. He had transferred property to his brother's name. He had moved investments to offshore accounts. She looked directly at Victoria. I walked away from a 15-year marriage with $30,000 and a 10-year-old car. Michael walked away with everything else. The people in the church were murmuring to each other. Some looked disgusted, others looked uncomfortable. This was not the kind of story they expected to hear at a society wedding. But that's not the worst part, Sarah continued. The worst part was how he dealt with our children's memory. During the divorce, his lawyer argued that I was mentally unstable because I still visited their graves. They said I was obsessed with death and needed psychiatric help. Victoria gasped. He used your grief against you in court? He tried to, Sarah said. His lawyer wanted to prove that I was not mentally competent to make decisions about money or property. They said my depression made me unfit to receive alimony. They said I needed to be institutionalized. Tears started flowing down Sarah's face again. Michael sat in that courtroom and let his lawyer say those things about me. He let them attack me for missing my dead children. He let them call me crazy for grieving. She looked at Michael with pain in her eyes. Do you remember what you said to me after the final hearing? Michael did not answer. He remembered, but he could not say it out loud. Not in front of all these people. You said I was damaged goods, Sarah said. You said no man would ever want me because I was broken. You said I should be grateful for the little bit of money you gave me because I would never be able to take care of myself. The church was completely silent. Even the security guards looked ashamed to be hearing this story. After the divorce was final, Michael moved in with Jennifer, Sarah continued. She helped him start his new business. She used her connections to get him investors. She worked 18-hour days with him to build his company. She looked around at all the success surrounding them. This whole empire was built on the ashes of our marriage. This whole fortune was built on forgetting our children. This whole new life was built on abandoning the woman who had stood by him through the worst tragedy of his life. Victoria was staring at Michael like she had never seen him before. Is this true? She asked him. Did you really do all these things? Michael felt desperate. You don't understand what it was like, he said. I was grieving too. I was in pain too. I had to find a way to survive. By destroying me? Sarah asked. By pretending our children never existed? By building your success on my suffering? She turned to Victoria. Do you want to know what happened to Jennifer? The woman he left me for, Victoria nodded, even though she was afraid to hear more. As soon as Michael's business became successful, he left her too, Sarah said. She had served her purpose. She had helped him get rich. But she was a reminder of a difficult time in his life. So he replaced her with someone younger and prettier. She looked around at all the people listening. That's his pattern. When life gets hard, he runs away. When people remind him of pain, he abandons them. When he gets what he wants, he moves on to something better. Victoria was crying again. How many women has he done this to? I don't know, Sarah said. I lost track after Jennifer, but I know he's never changed. He's never learned to deal with difficult emotions. He's never learned to keep his promises when keeping them becomes hard. She looked directly at Michael. Have you ever visited their graves? Have you ever said their names out loud? Have you ever told Victoria about Emma and James? Michael could not answer. He had not visited the cemetery once in 5 years. He had not said his children's names since the divorce. He had not told Victoria they ever existed. That's what I thought, Sarah said. You've spent 5 years pretending they never happened. You've built your whole new life on erasing them from your memory. She turned to Victoria one last time. That's the man you're about to marry. That's the man who will promise to love you forever. But when forever becomes difficult, when forever becomes painful, when forever requires him to sacrifice something he wants, he'll walk away from you just like he walked away from me. The church was filled with whispers and shocked faces. Victoria was sobbing. Michael was standing frozen at the altar. His perfect wedding had become his worst nightmare. Sarah had one more thing to say. I didn't come here to ruin your wedding, Victoria. I came here to save you from making the same mistake I made. I came here to tell you that the man you think you love doesn't exist. The real Michael Richardson is the man who abandons people when they need him most. Sarah finished speaking and stood quietly in front of the altar. The church was completely silent. 300 people sat in shock, trying to process everything they had just heard. The only sound was Victoria's quiet sobbing. The minister did not know what to do. In 30 years of performing weddings, nothing like this had ever happened. He looked at Michael, then at Victoria, then at Sarah. He waited for someone to say something. Victoria slowly turned to look at Michael. Her face was wet with tears. Her perfect makeup was ruined. Her beautiful wedding dress suddenly felt heavy and wrong. Is it true? She whispered. All of it? Michael's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. How could he explain? How could he defend himself? Everything Sarah had said was true, but it sounded so much worse when she said it out loud. The children, Victoria said, her voice getting stronger. Emma and James, did you really have children who died? Michael nodded slowly. He could not lie about that. Not with Sarah standing right there. Not with all these people watching. And, you never told me? Victoria's voice was getting louder. We've been together for 2 years. We talked about having children together. And you never told me you already had children who died. I couldn't, Michael said weakly. It was too painful. I didn't want to think about it anymore. Too painful? Victoria's voice cracked. They were your children. How could you just forget them? Sarah watched this conversation with sad eyes. She felt no joy in seeing Michael exposed. She felt no satisfaction in watching his perfect life fall apart. She only felt tired and sad. Victoria, Michael said, reaching for her hand, I can explain everything. We can work through this. We can still get married. Victoria pulled her hand away from him. Work through this. You abandoned your wife when she was grieving your dead children. You had an affair while she was still in therapy. You took everything from her in the divorce and left her with nothing. She looked around at all the people watching them. These are our friends, our families, important people from our community, and you let them all believe you were a good man. You let them all believe you were worthy of respect. Michael felt panic rising in his chest. I am a good man, he said desperately. I made mistakes, but I learned from them. I'm different now. I'm successful now. I can give you everything you want. Everything I want. Victoria laughed bitterly. I wanted to marry a man with integrity. I wanted to marry a man who keeps his promises. I wanted to marry a man who would stand by me through good times and bad times. She looked at him with disgust. But you're not that man, are you? You're the man who runs away when life gets hard. You're the man who abandons people when they need you most. David, Michael's best man, stepped forward. Maybe we should postpone the ceremony, he said quietly. Give everyone time to process. No, Victoria said firmly. There's nothing to process. I'm not marrying him. Not today. Not ever. She started to walk away from the altar, but then she stopped and turned back to Sarah. Thank you, she said. Thank you for having the courage to tell me the truth. Thank you for saving me from making the biggest mistake of my life. Sarah nodded. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. I'm sorry your special day was ruined. My special day was already ruined, Victoria said. It was ruined the moment I agreed to marry a man who could abandon his grieving wife and forget his dead children. She turned to Michael one last time. I hope you get help. I hope you learn to deal with your pain in a healthy way. But I can't be with someone who handles grief by running away from it. Victoria walked down the aisle toward the back of the church. Her family and friends followed her. One by one, the guests began to leave. They whispered to each other as they walked out. Some looked at Michael with pity. Others looked at him with disgust. Soon, only a few people remained in the church. Michael stood alone at the altar, still wearing his expensive suit. His perfect wedding was over. His perfect life was falling apart. Sarah walked over to him. I'm sorry it had to happen this way, she said quietly. Michael looked at her with anger in his eyes. Are you? Are you really sorry? Or are you happy that you destroyed my life? Sarah shook her head. I'm not happy about any of this. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to save Victoria from the same pain I went through. You ruined everything, Michael said bitterly. I worked so hard to build this life. I worked so hard to become successful. And you destroyed it all in one afternoon. I didn't destroy anything, Sarah said calmly. I just told the truth. If the truth destroyed your life, then maybe your life was built on lies. Michael had no answer for that. He knew she was right, but he was too angry and hurt to admit it. What do you want from me? He asked. Do you want me to apologize? Do you want me to say I was wrong? Will that make you happy? Sarah looked at him with sad eyes. I don't want anything from you, Michael. I just want you to remember them. I want you to say their names. I want you to visit their graves. I want you to honor their memory. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small card. This is the address of the cemetery. Section 12, Plot 47. They're buried under a small headstone that says Emma Rose Richardson and James Michael Richardson. Beloved children. Michael took the card but did not look at it. I go there every Sunday, Sarah said. I bring them flowers and tell them about my week. I tell them how much I love them and miss them. I tell them about their father, even though their father has forgotten them. Tears started running down Michael's face. For the first time in 5 years, he was thinking about his children. He was remembering their tiny faces and their small hands. He was remembering the 3 hours he had held them. I didn't forget them, he whispered. I couldn't handle the pain. It was too much. I thought if I stopped thinking about them, it would hurt less. Sarah nodded. I understand. Grief is hard. But running away from it doesn't make it go away. It just makes it grow stronger. She turned to leave, but Michael called her name. Sarah? She turned back to him. Are you okay? Are you happy? Sarah smiled sadly. I'm learning to be okay. I'm in therapy. I have a job I like. I have friends who support me. It's not the life I planned, but it's a good life. I'm glad, Michael said, and he meant it. Sarah walked toward the church doors. Before she left, she turned back one more time. It's not too late, Michael. You can still choose to remember them. You can still choose to honor their memory. You can still choose to be the father you promised to be. Then she was gone, and Michael was alone in the empty church. Over the next few weeks, Michael's life changed completely. The story of what happened at his wedding spread through the community. Some people were sympathetic. others were judgmental. Many simply avoided him. His business partners questioned his character. Some of his wealthy friends stopped inviting him to parties. His reputation was damaged, perhaps beyond repair, but slowly Michael began to do something he had not done in 5 years. He began to remember, he began to grieve. He began to visit the cemetery where his children were buried. The first time he went, he could barely get out of his car. The second time, he stood at their graves for just a few minutes. The third time, he brought flowers. He started seeing a therapist to help him deal with his grief and guilt. He learned that running away from pain only makes it worse. He learned that remembering his children was not a burden but a gift. Michael never got his perfect life back. He never married Victoria. He never rebuilt his reputation completely. But he found something more important than success and respect. He found peace. He found a way to honor his children's memory. He found a way to live with his grief instead of running from it. And every Sunday, he visited Emma Rose and James Michael Richardson, and he told them how much he loved them. Sarah had been right. It was not too late to choose to remember. It was not too late to choose to be the father he had promised to be. The price of truth had been high, but it had also been healing. And in the end, that was worth more than any perfect wedding or perfect life.